Welcome back. Joining us now for more on that third and final presidential debate is author and political historian Mark Weston, Susan Nylon, who is covering this year's elections for the Associated Press, and Republican State Committee woman A.J. Jansen. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
So first of all, let's just start off. This is our last debate. Let's let everyone have a chance to share your thoughts on how you think each candidate performed. And we'll start with you, A.J.
Well, Donald Trump did very well last night. He was poised, he was in control, but yet he was himself. I don't think that we want him to lose the one character issue that really makes him stand out and makes him Donald Trump. But I think that he was in control. He made some comments that were controversial this morning, so I guess we'll be talking about that, but I gave him an A.
Okay, and Mark, your thoughts?
I think it's interesting today that the fact checkers have been giving mostly truths to Hillary Clinton's statements and mostly falses to Donald Trump's statements. To me, one of the most amazing things was when she criticized him. I'm losing my train of thought, I'm sorry. When she criticized him and he just said, about the disabled reporter. She criticized him for mocking the disabled reporter for the New York Times, and he said into the microphone, wrong. And this is a video that everyone in the country has seen. You don't need a reporter to suddenly say, well, here's the fact here, where's the fact there. Everyone has seen this video, and yet he's in his own reality and says, wrong.
Even though he denied originally that that's the gesture he was making. I guess that's where he's going with the wrong comment, correct? And Susan, your thoughts on how each candidate performed?
Oh, each candidate, I would say that you know, for the three debates, I thought last night was the most solid. I thought each candidate was really comfortable in their own skin, even if we didn't necessarily receive it that way. I certainly think that Trump was better prepped for last night than he was in the prior two, but I thought Hillary was absolutely excellent. And if you consider the past elections, and President Obama really fumbled on the very first debate of his last election, she was flawless in all three of them, and there was no real big, you know, oh, everybody's talking about the next day because there was a problem. So the only thing I would have to say is that I was, again, really disappointed that we never really cover a whole lot of substance. You know, it starts off that way, and then all of a sudden it comes into just a bunch of zingers and accusations, and that's disappointing.
Now, overall, this debate was less viewed that way, that maybe this was more of a policy debate than the other two. And Mark, would you agree with that?
I would. I think Chris Wallace did an excellent job trying to keep it as substantive as possible. It was harder in the second half of the debate once the zingers began. I think the turning point was when Hillary Clinton said to Donald Trump, you went to Mexico and met with President Nieto and never brought up immigration. He choked. And I think that word made Trump more snarly for the rest of the debate.
And AJ, where do you see maybe Trump's weakness last night? What would you have wished maybe he wouldn't have said?
Well, we have to remember that Mr. Trump is not a politician. He was never on a debate team. He doesn't have the experience to memorize what he should say. And I think that's part of the thing that makes him most attractive, is that he speaks what he's thinking and what he's feeling. So I think that, yes, maybe in time he'll be more polished, but he's captured the hearts of the average person because he's not as eloquent as Hillary or as Ted Cruz, who was the debating champion at Harvard. So, but he has touched the hearts of a lot of hard-working people that have been really hurt very badly by this economy and the decisions that were made about Obamacare. By the way, that was all Democrat, not one single Republican voted for that. So we have taken a beating on the economy and we have not recovered. We have malignant growth at 1%. And we can't blame George Bush on that anymore. It's time that these people of the establishment took responsibility. And I disagree with you about how Hillary was concise and divisive about her remarks. When she pivoted, she did not want to answer the foundation questions. She didn't want to, every time The question was asked her. She smiled. She looked around, she smiled, and she never gave that concise answer. So she avoided answering.
So we'll give you all a chance to respond to that when we come back. We do have to take a quick break. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're discussing the third and final presidential debate. Our guests tonight are author and political historian Mark Weston, Susan Nylon, who is covering this year's elections for the Associated Press, and Republican State Committee woman A.J. Jansen. So when we start our discussion in this section, I'd like to talk about Donald Trump, who was asked by the moderator, Chris Wallace, if he would accept the results of the election. And here's what he had to say.
One of the prides of this country is the peaceful transition of power, and that no matter how hard fought a campaign is, that at the end of the campaign, that the loser concedes to the winner. Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
That's horrifying. You know, every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him.
So I want to give everyone a chance to respond to this. We'll start with you, Susan.
You know, it's surprising to most of the country because there is a certain amount of decorum that's expected amongst a loser. We're taught from a very early age good sportsmanship. When you lose gracefully. And you accept the will of the people. I think the idea that every time it doesn't go his way that he accuses it of being rigged, except if he's winning, there's, you know, a big discrepancy in that logic. You know, and then I'd have to ask, what exactly does he mean that he's not going to accept it? Is he going to go cry in a room, or is, you know, he just really going to make a big public statement about it? But more importantly, and I think what most people are concerned about is not what he will do, but what will his supporters do? What will they be inspired to do, and will he allow it to happen? And that's a really big security concern.
Today, many Republicans have been pointing out that Al Gore did not concede for 5 weeks, but this is apples and oranges. No one is contesting Trump's right to contest a close election. He should fight for every vote, even while they're being counted, after they've been counted. But once it's clear that a candidate has lost, a gracious concession speech is central to American political tradition.
Yep.
Okay, and AJ, your response.
Okay, what I'll say first is that this is Democratic hysteria. That all he said was, I may not accept the results. And if it's close, we don't want him to do that. We want to do a recount or whatever. We did that before, as Mark had mentioned. So, but I think it's hysteria in grabbing on words that Donald Trump says and then trying to run with it to create more hype.
But aren't you supposed to grab on the words of someone who wants to be president? That's his whole point of having a platform.
I don't think so. I think we
Sorry.
have I think we have much more at stake in this country, and we need to focus on the jobs. We need to focus on energy. We have to make, to use his statement, we have to make America great again. We need respect back in this country. So to gleam on to stupid little words that what he may have said, we're second guessing
Although
what
he
really
did on
meant.
the campaign trail today say, I will accept the results of this year's election, and then he paused, and then he said, if I win.
Okay, that's gleaming on to words again, because he was joking.
Is he capable of giving a gracious concession speech?
Yes, he is. I met the gentleman 4 times, and he is extremely gracious. And actually, some of these things that happen is not the Donald Trump that I have met before, and most of the times we're here in Sarasota.
And what do you account for that, that it's not
I
the same
think
person?
he has in his mind how to run this campaign. Clearly, he is running it himself. It is his theory. And I think the way that he threw out the other 16 candidates was because he took them off guard. No one expected that kind of a primary campaign, and he won. Donald Trump wants to win. He is a winner. However, if it's a bad deal, he'll walk away from it.
Okay, so we're going to move on to one of the other topics discussed last night. Moderator, again, Chris Wallace, he pressed Trump. He asked him, if you become president, would you like to see Roe versus Wade overturned? Trump kind of skirted around the issue, and then Wallace asked him again multiple times, and this was his final answer.
Do you want to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, will happen.
This is one of the worst possible choices that any woman and her family has to make. And I do not believe the government should be making it.
Now, what Hillary Clinton was addressing was partial birth abortions, late-term abortions, which Trump said he is completely against, and Hillary Clinton came out and said some of these are medical decisions, not optional decisions made by the patient. But let's first talk about the statements made by Trump that if he put conservative judges there, justices there, that it would be overturned.
He didn't just say that, though. He maybe, you maybe took that from that, but what he really said was he was going to push it back onto the states,
right,
and that it would be states' rights.
But then when he did say that at first, and then he went next to saying,
because you can't keep up with his, you watch him and he changes his mind before the sentence comes out. So it starts one way and it goes up to another. You know, this is a federal law. It wasn't a law that grew up through the states and then became a federal law. So to think that he could just put 3 conservative judges in there, unless something miraculous happened, I don't think he's ever going to get that chance anyway. He's not very factual on not only how it works, but also on the what happens with abortion. I mean, he was talking yesterday or last night about, you know, the day of birth, ripping the child out or cutting the womb open. You know, it's called a C-section. You know, yes, we do that, but it's not for the reasons that he's implying. So I just think he gets to a point where he says whatever he thinks he's supposed to say to make the base happy. I don't really think there's a whole lot of thought process in really thinking through his ideas.
Half of all abortions are in the first 6 weeks of pregnancy, which is 10 weeks before the first brain cells even appear in the fetus. It's just, the other thing I always find hard to understand is the decisions where they're fighting the spread of birth control, Planned Parenthood, Hobby Lobby, the very same people who are against abortion. And it's easy to understand why anybody would be against abortion, but then they start fighting the right for a woman to have access to birth control, which would prevent abortion. And I find this
although
inexplicable.
that wasn't really discussed much last night. But AJ, your reaction to this Roe v. Wade
I was waiting
exchange.
for you to get to me. I'm going to make a statement. People, women, wake up. I do not understand why our female organs are discussed every time when there's an election. My reproductive system and yours should not come up in every election. Roe versus Wade, people need to understand it does not restrict the woman from having an abortion, but it made it a federal law that states must provide it. But it would go back to the states. But first of all, even if the whole Supreme Court was all conservative, a case needs to be brought up before the court, before the judges decide. So I would say to all women there, you're being suckered. You're being suckered in every election by being threatened that Roe versus Wade will be overturned. That would not happen unless something was brought up.
Can I respond now? See, that's the problem.
Could you wait one more?
Oh,
No,
sure.
Because, yep. Because the other thing, too, is you were talking about the procedure on a late-term abortion.
Yeah.
The procedure on a late-term abortion is that they turn the baby's head upside down, they breech the baby, they take a long needle with a hook on it, and they put it in the back of the neck, and they mash the brain. And then, because it's a breech birth, this is true. You want to say,
I know.
Well, let's not get into all the details
but then
about
they
that.
delivered the baby breeched. And there are many times when that baby has still been alive, and then you have a child with severe mental problems.
Okay, I'll give Susan one to respond quickly, and
Thank
then we're going to
you.
move on to the next topic.
All I was going to say is that you say that we're suckers because it's brought up every election. Something has to be brought up. every single year it's brought up. There are bills amongst the state that make it up to the higher levels of the court that are constantly challenging our right to make our own decisions. So it's brought up on a regular basis, which is why it's extremely important. And since Roe v. Wade was passed in the 70s, it's always been challenged. And that's why it's an important issue. It's an important issue for us, and it should be an important issue for everyone. And we need to know what somebody's position is on it before we decide to elect them for president.
Okay, so our next
Can I finish
topic.
talking
Well, I
about
want to
that?
move
Just
on
one
to
thing.
this. I just want to move on to this. So one of the biggest issues that is affecting Trump's campaign right now are the comments that he made in that tape released with Billy Bush about women. And then since then, some women have come forward accusing Trump of different accusations. And he was asked about that last night. Let's hear what he had to say.
I believe, Chris, that she got these people to step forward. If it wasn't, they get their 10 minutes of fame. But they were all totally, it was all fiction. It was lies and it was fiction.
So, Mark, how did he handle that whole exchange about these women accusers?
There's no good way for him to handle it, so by saying it's fiction, he did the best he could. But each of these women who have come out, their stories have been corroborated by friends and relatives who said, yes, she talked about this groping to me at the time. So if you're going to believe that this is fiction, you have to believe not only did these 10 women come out and make up a story, but these 10 women also each had several friends and relatives who were willing to participate in this public so-called fiction. So now you're talking about 30 or 40 people making things up. So I think these stories have been corroborated.
And AJ, we have less than a minute left, but I want you to respond to how you think he handled that question.
Well, personally, I agree with Mark. There's really a difficult way to handle it because what you do is you have to call women liars, or you have to say they are being paid by the Democratic National Committee to discredit him. The one with Bush, that one was recorded, and he apologized. But I say again to the public, is this what we are going to decide on, all this gossip and the salacious stuff that happened 30 years ago? Let's look at what Hillary's the one that is running for president. She put our country in jeopardy with those releasing and having her own server.
Before we get into that, we are going to have to take a quick break.
Okay.
And when we come back, we'll get our final reactions from our guests. The debates are over, and in 19 days, Americans will decide who will be our next president. So did last night make a difference? Our guests join us now for their final thoughts on that matter. Does this really matter in the general election, this debate or any of the debates?
Well, I think the debates do matter. I think that they matter if something negative happens or if there's a really big faux pas. At least that's the way it used to be. The amount of incorrect facts that were given last night would never have been accepted in debates before. Does it move the needle? I would say sort of move the needle. Those people that are on the edge, those people that were Bernie supporters, or the people from the Green Party or from the Libertarian Party, they might be waffling between the two, and something like last night would have helped them decide. But for the most of us, all it did was reaffirm what we already knew about both candidates.
Hillary Clinton looked and spoke in a very presidential manner in all three debates. The toss-up states now are Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, Arizona. That's a very good position for her to be in. She gets accused of things on a daily basis by conservatives, but she gets cleared, and they don't want to hear about her being cleared. But I think most moderates and liberals know this, and so I think she's in a very good position to win in 2 weeks.
And AJ, your thoughts?
Boy, Mark, you're the one that I have to keep correcting. Okay, Hillary Clinton does not get cleared. She did not get cleared with the emails. She did not respond to those. She did not get cleared on the foundation. She did not get cleared because she didn't answer those questions. And just because Comey from the FBI said that he's not going to press charges, we also know there are questions that we have to delve in completely to see how this investigation was done. Because first, he nailed her to the cross, then he doesn't want to take her down, so people will say, poor Hillary.
With the foundation, she was accused of meeting with a Bahraini crown prince and with a Nobel Prize laureate, both of whom she would have met with had they never had any association with the foundation.
Okay, Mark, the problem with it, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but we don't have enough time.
We don't, so let's move off of that, but just in these last few seconds, do you think this helps or hurts Trump going into the election?
I think it helped him. I think when the actual polls come out, I think he will get a little bump from this, and then we'll see what else comes up on Hillary, because that's an endless line of more information that's coming out on her. But I will say that we want someone that will roll up his sleeves, that can get to work and clean up the mess that Barack Obama and Hillary made.
Okay, we'll have to leave it at that for this discussion. I know this could go on for much longer, but I do thank you all for sharing your thoughts. And before we go, we want to share what some of our viewers are saying about a story we reported on yesterday. A new Gallup poll reveals a record high 60% of American adults support legalizing marijuana for recreational use. 9 states will decide whether to expand legal access to pot on Election Day. Recreational use of marijuana is legal in Alaska, Colorado, Oregon, Washington State, and District of Columbia. They could be joined by Arizona, California, Maine, Massachusetts, and Nevada, depending on Election Day results. 3 states, including Florida, will decide whether to permit marijuana for medical purposes. We asked you what you thought if marijuana should be used for those purposes. Meech Sari writes, quote, no, because we can't trust anyone to regulate it. Better yet, we can't trust people not to abuse it. Scotty B wrote in and said, it's not about the ability to smoke and get high. It's about the freedom of choices for medical use. And Chad Smitty writes, I can't believe it's 2016 and we are still talking about this. It blows my mind. If you would like to join the conversation on tonight's topic, you can visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And I want to thank all of our guests for being here tonight. Mark Weston, author and political historian, Susan Nylon, covering the elections for the Associated Press, and A.J. Jansen, a state committee woman for the Republican Party. And when we return, we'll have a final check on our forecast, plus stay tuned for our primetime headline.